Introduction to the fourth edition of the Solicitors Professional Conduct, and I'm joined with Robert Baker, who's chair of the Guidance and Ethics Committee, and with Justine Carty, who's a previous chair or immediate chair of the Guidance and Ethics Committee. So you're very welcome here today.
Thanks very much, Justin. I'm delighted to be here. Always delighted to join your lunchtime seminars. I know when I was in practice, I found them very useful and helpful. And from the cluster events around the country, I know that your stand at all these events, practitioners find them very helpful in their practice. So delighted to be here. Thank you very much.
And Robert, you're very welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is my first one, so my first one in the hot seat. I've attended many of them and I've very much enjoyed them. So hopefully I'll be able to repay all the enjoyment I've derived out of your previous ones.
Thank you very much.
You know something, actually, Robert, I always find that, it's a great opportunity to just share from our own experiences and our own mistakes in the past, that it's all a learning, it's all learning for all of us.
Absolutely.
So I thought I'd just flash up there our future sessions. So on the 22nd of March, we're going to do a session on what to do if you receive a complaint from the LSRA, which I know a lot of people at the moment are receiving complaints. And what we're going to do here is have somebody who's on one of the LSRA panels, and Amy Maguire from the regulation department is also going to talk to us about what supports are available and how to deal with these complaints if you receive them, because some of them are more specific than others and more general than others, etc. So there's a little bit of confusion around who can make a complaint, why they've made a complaint about me, and it can maybe put the fear in you. And maybe there's practical ways that we can talk about, which might assist people in just making the process a little bit easier and understand how the process actually works. And then on the 5th of April, we're going to talk to Evan Partners about research findings of Irish law firms in 2022-23. So we'll see some sort of trajectory as to regards to where the industry is at the moment, or the profession is at the moment, and how they see it rolling out going forward. So there's been, obviously the war in Ukraine, recession, increase in interest rates. Has that changed the confidence or the feeling of amongst solicitors? And then on the 19th of April, we're going to talk about the benefits of being a consultant. So an alternative way of being in practice, maybe without a lot of the administrative regulatory heartache that goes along with being a solicitor at the moment for a small practitioner. So if anyone has a question out there, we'll take it. You can send me an email, jpersonal@lawsociety.ie, and I'll come back to you on that. So without further ado, I think it's just gone 1 o'clock, so I'll stop my share and I'll formally welcome you all again. So you're all very welcome to this practice support information session, and I'm joined today by Robert Baker, who's chair of the Guidance and Ethics Committee, and Justine Carty, who's immediate past chair of the Guidance and Ethics Committee. So we're going to have a chat today with them both about this recently published guide, the Solicitors Guide to Professional Conduct, 4th edition. So you're both very welcome.
Thanks very much, Robert, or Justin. Sorry, Justin. And I'm delighted to be here with Robert. So thank you very much for hosting us, Justin. You actually just mentioned, I suppose, a very sensitive point for me when you said about one of the upcoming presentations was from the LSRA and about the number of complaints made against solicitors. I suppose I'm frequently asked how I got involved with the Guidance and Ethics Committee in the Law Society. And I suppose, to be very honest, when I was newly qualified, I was in my first year of practice, and a client made a complaint about me for inadequate legal services to the Law Society. And I suppose it caused an awful lot of upset and stress in my life. And I told nobody about the complaint at the time. I told my boss, and my boss was like, "You'll be grand." I told nobody else, and I dealt with it myself. And I suppose, a year later, I got a letter from the Law Society to say that they were making no finding against me. But in that year, the stress and the sleepless nights that I had. So that's why when an opportunity came up to join the Guidance and Ethics Committee, I took it, because it's all about sharing and learning from our experiences, and learning how to cope and to deal with circumstances when a complaint is made against you, because more often than not, complaints will be made against solicitors at some point in your career. So that's me, and that's why I'm here. I'm a solicitor who qualified in 2008. I worked in private practice for, I think, was it 9 years before I joined then the public sector, and I am now with the organisation that's now called Taoiseach Éireann, that formerly known as the Property Registration Authority, but we have now merged with the Valuation Office and Ordnance Survey Ireland, so it's now called Taoiseach Éireann. I am the past chair of the Guidance and Ethics Committee, and I'm joined here by the current chair, so my wonderful colleague Robert, and today we're going to talk to you about ethics and professional conduct in practice. So what we're going to, that was the introduction just about me. I'll let Robert introduce himself when it's his turn. So what we're going to talk to you today about is how professional conduct and ethics, how we take a value-based model of professional conduct and ethics in Ireland. I'm going to go through the core values of the profession. Robert is then going to go through the Solicitor's Guide to Professional Conduct with you. And then finally, Robert will go through what to do or the steps to take if you're faced with an ethical dilemma and where to ask for help. Because I think one of the most important things if you are faced with an ethical dilemma in your practice is to reach out and ask for help at all times. Because I always remember that, you know, back in 2009 when that complaint was made against me, I never asked anybody for any help. So it's probably one of the learnings that I've made, that if you ever get into a difficult situation, always reach out and ask for help and know where to ask for help. So what do I mean by a values-based approach? So ethics and professional conduct is based on a values model approach. So it's a fundamental part of professional conduct and ethics to understand the importance that values play in ethical behaviour and in professional conduct. So first of all, you know, when I'm talking about values and a values-based approach towards professional conduct and ethics, what are values? So values represent our guiding principles, our motivations, and what influences the attitudes that we hold and what we consider as our norms and our, normal behaviors. So what we consider our norms and our normal behaviors and what we consider are good within a particular group, the community or organization or in our firm, that's what I mean by values. So our values guide us and they motivate us in how we behave and how we behave in our practice. So we can have personal values that are personal values to ourselves. We can have the firm values, and then we can have professional values. So when I talk about personal values, these are personal values to myself or to yourself, to the individual. So our own personal values are the values or ideals that we consider are important, that motivate and that guide us. So then our own personal values really, I suppose, influence the choices that we make in our practice and how we live our lives and how we behave and how we act. So that's why values are important in guiding our own behavior. So it's like our own values also what I would say is that they kind of act as a filter in how you behave in your life. So values would be different from the characteristics and traits that you look to, that you look up to your role model, that they might have certain characteristics that you admire. So these would be traits and characteristics, but rather values are what we consider to be important. They're different from ethics and from our morals, because values motivate us. They motivate us in how to behave, whereas norms, ethics, or morals kind of restrict or constrain our behavior. So for me, when I look and when I ask myself, what are my personal values? So my personal values would be loyalty, honesty, kindness, integrity, and courage. Because for me, I think, it's having the courage to speak up for what you believe in. So it's like, I don't need to go through my own personal values, but it's like we all have our own personal values. So then I move on now to our firm values. So we can also have values that guide the behavior of our firm and what's important to us in our firms and in our practices. So as I said, they're what motivate us and what guide us, the behaviors that are, expected and norms within our firms. So, and you'll see if you go to any of the, the websites of law firms, you'll always see what, the vision and the mission and the values of the firm are. So they really, the values of a firm influence the attitudes and behaviors of the staff. So it's important that when you state what the values are of your firm, that you actually put your values into practice, that they're not just up on your website, that they're actually incorporated into how your firm behaves and into your policies and into your practices as a firm. So then professional values, and this now moves us on to professional values and the values of the solicitor's profession. And the values of, we have core values of the solicitor's profession, and those core values are contained in the Solicitor's Guide to Professional Conduct. So our core values of the profession is honesty, integrity, independence, confidentiality, and avoidance of conflict of interest. So these are the values that shape our profession and guide and motivate us in how we behave as a profession. So like to go down through each of the values, like what is honesty? So for me, it means more than just speaking and acting truthfully. It's more than just not lying or not stealing. So it goes beyond that, and it goes towards how you treat others and how you respect, how you show respect towards your colleagues and others. It's about having self-awareness in your behavior towards other people. So that's why when I was saying there about my own personal values and your firm values, and now it's the same with your professional values, that these are the values that kind of guide and motivate us, and that should be at the fundamental part in our practice as a solicitor in practice.
Justine, a quick question, like, are these values fixed or can they change?
They can change, of course they can change, Justin, but these were the values that we identified, that have been identified, since the beginning of, the solicitor's profession as being important to the profession. So that's why, your own personal values might change, your own organizational values might change, and likewise the professional values might change as well, or of the entire profession. But these were the principal core values that were identified, and for me, it's like courage, as I said, is one of my big personal values, and it should be one of the core values of the profession as well. But it's like, where does it stop and where does it end? So that's why these were the core values identified for being a solicitor. But it's like, you also have to remember, when we're talking about our core values and when we're talking about professional conduct and ethics, how our behavior is really regulated as a solicitor. We have legislation, we have all the regulations that we don't want to talk about, but we also have then the core values of the profession. And the core values of the profession, that's why I wanted to explain what values are. So your values are what motivates you and guides you in your practice. So they can certainly change over time, but these were identified as the principal core values of the legal profession. So, when I talk then about honesty, and, one of the things then that I would say about honesty is like about being true to yourself in your principles and in your personal values, as well as the values of the profession. That when you are a solicitor, depending on the time of day, that you could wear a different hat. You could be an educator 1 minute, and then you could be managing a difficult client another minute. So it's just depending on the particular hat that you're wearing at a time. So always try to align with your core values with how you behave in practice. And then the importance of making value-based choices in how you practice and in your ethical decision making. That if you have a difficult decision to make, what I would suggest is always bringing it back. And if you don't know what to do, because, you know, none of us know everything, you know, and there will always be a particular situation that the facts of every case, you know, are not similar across the board. So that's why I always bring it back to the core values of the profession, of honesty, integrity, that is, you know, have integrity, that your word is your bond, and what you say is what you do, and what your values are is how you behave in practice. The next core value then is in relation to independence. And this really means that you're not influenced in your decision making. So a particular example that I use here is that independence from being nearly bullied or influenced by clients, because it can arise in practice that a client would say to you that, no, if you say that, you know, and for example, like you might say, I don't have particular expertise in family law, but then they say to you, oh, that's fine, I still want you to act. That you're nearly bullied into acting for the client, where you should be acting independently and say, no, I can't accept these instructions because I don't have the sufficient expertise in this particular area of law. That your decision making should not be influenced by any third parties, and that includes clients. So the next core value then is about confidentiality. And really there's kind of two parts of confidentiality. The first is to keep the business of the clients confidential, so not to disclose them to any third party. And then the second thing about confidentiality is not to actually disclose that you act on behalf of a particular client. So you have to keep the client number one, and then their business confidential. However, with everything, there's always exceptions. There's always exceptions. So, you know, one of the exceptions is that if there's a court requiring disclosure, or if there's a body requiring disclosure, such as the Gardaí or the Revenue. There's the other exception, of course, is that if you have the permission of the client. So you'd often see on LinkedIn to say that a particular firm, you know, carried out acted on behalf of X client in some huge transaction, that would be disclosed with the permission of the client. So it's just, you know, when we talk about confidentiality, for me, this, you know, brings it all back to the position of trust that we are in society, you know, because of our role as a solicitor, because clients come to us because they trust us. They trust us to keep their business confidential. They come to us at, you know, sometimes the most distressing times in their life. So it's like, this is why it's a core value of our profession that we are trusted with this sensitive information. And then finally, the core value of the profession is avoidance of conflict of interest. So I have to say there's a very detailed chapter in the guide, the Solicitor's Guide to Professional Conduct, in relation to avoidance of conflict of interest. And a conflict of interest can arise in conveyancing and non-conveyancing matters. So there is very detailed notes and guidance in the updated guide. So that's my segment. And just to recap, that we have a values-based approach to to professional conduct and how to ethical behaviour. So it's just always ask yourself, you know, what are my personal values? What's the firm values? And then what are the core values of the profession? And to align the core values in how we behave and how we act in our practice as a solicitor. So I'll pass you on now to the fantastic current chair of the Guidance and Ethics Committee, Robert Baker, a fantastic colleague and friend from Cork. So Robert, there you go.
Thanks very much, Justine. But just by way of very brief introduction, as Justine said, I am a fantastic colleague, and also I'm from Cork. I've been in private practice my entire career, which started qualified in 2000, so kind of 22, 23 years at this stage. And I just picking up on what Justine said at the start of her segment about the sharing and learning and making decisions, I think that's a really important point to make. And I think very often, particularly with younger colleagues, I used to often have a favoured phrase that I would say, you know, you'll never get in trouble for making a mistake, but you might get in trouble for covering it up. Because very often when you're early in your career, you don't have the breadth of knowledge or the experience to know whether you've made a big mistake or a small mistake. And I remember myself as a trainee on one occasion thinking I made a small mistake and didn't think it was anything major, and I got absolutely killed for it. and another occasion made a mistake that I lost sleep for about a week before I eventually fessed up to my boss, who said, "Oh, that's nothing. That'll be fine." So you need to rely on colleagues and friends to get a steer with certain things. And the other thing I would say as well about Justine's segment there, the core values of the profession, as she was talking, I think it's something that we all think about, even though we might necessarily categorize it in that way, and it is quite an abstract concept, but it's in many ways, it's kind of your core values are the lens through which you approach everything as a solicitor, and that would be the way that I might characterize it. So now that we have our lenses on and we know we've identified our values as solicitors and how we should approach them, then we need further tools to make various decisions. And I suppose ethics in general is something that's very personal to each solicitor. There's no we don't really operate in our profession in particular, we don't operate in a life of black and white. Everything is the lines are blurred with everything. And ethics is no different in that respect. So you have to, when you find yourself with a dilemma of some description, you need to look at it through the lens of your core values, but you need to reach a decision based on your own personal view. The guide is, as it suggests, is a guide, and it's a very helpful tool to facilitate you with this. It's not a rule book, it's not a code, it's not a manual, it doesn't have the force of law, but what it is a very handy source of reference on professional conduct for all solicitors. It's really there to complement your own value-based system, and it will point you in the direction of various regulations or various principles, but really it's to assist you in reaching your own personal decisions. So look, there are many and varied ethical questions arising every day, and this the guide, which the 4th edition, which has recently been published, is an update on the previous versions, obviously, and it has been updated to take account of maybe changes in how things are approached. One of the small things that was done in this one was the use of he and she has been removed, and it's now they. So we're getting very modern with the updated guide. But it's for all solicitors, whether you're in public or private practice, whether you're in-house, newly qualified 50 years. So there's something in it for everyone, really. You move on to the next slide there, Justine, please. So I suppose there's a number of different ways that you can use the guide, and what has been done with it is there's a very detailed contents section at the start, and it's broken down very well, but then at the back there's also a really detailed index, and it's been written with the intention that you can dip in and out of it wherever you need. And if you have a specific query, it's remarkable actually that most of the things that you might come up with, if you just flick to the index at the back, you'll be able to find things very quickly. It's not an enormous book, so it's not a huge tome that you have to wade through. It's in very relatable language and very accessible. Every section is very accessible. Now look, there are obviously areas of it that will be repeated because there are overlaps in guidance depending on the particular issue. All of it really is representative of current law society policy and recommendations as at the date of publication, and it is used by the law school as the primary source material for teaching ethics to trainee solicitors. So it's an important document for for trainee solicitors and newly qualified solicitors as well. It's the first introduction they have to this aspect of practice, which is a very important area, really. Now, not all the answers are in the guide, and it's not intended that there would be all the answers. It's really intended that it will signpost you and assist you in making the decision that you have to come to yourself. So you're not going to find, can I do this or can I do that? You need to maybe assess that yourself based on your value judgment and your the core values of the profession. So it is available, the guide is available online in the Guidance and Ethics committee page. It's also, one copy has been delivered to each firm in the country. So many of you will already have a copy. If you don't have a copy, it just means somebody else in your office has one, because there has been one delivered to every office. And I have to say, it's not just because I was involved in the preparation of the updated guide, but I have found it to be enormously helpful over the last while. I suppose in our role as chair and vice chair and past chair of Guidance and Ethics, we do get a lot of questions, and it has helped an awful lot in being able to assist other colleagues, with it's like my master used to say when I was a trainee. If I asked him a question, he'd say, "What does the Act say?" Which used to drive me mad, because it meant I had to go in and look at the Act. But now it's, when somebody asks us a question, the first answer is really, what does the guide say? And you can use your index for that. Also, on the Guidance and Ethics webpage, actually, there's a very handy section where you can access any of the practice notes. So because obviously the guide, because it represents the society's best practice at the moment, it also then deals with all the regulatory issues and all the various practice notes that are applicable to each area. And you can either download a full copy of the guide from the Law Society website, or you can click into each individual chapter and it'll give you the practice notes relevant to each part. So that's actually a very handy resource, because a lot of the time the guide will tell you there is a practice note, but it mightn't necessarily give you any more detail than that. That is that. So there's a whole suite of services available when you find yourself in a dilemma. So you've found yourself with an ethical dilemma, and you've looked at it through the lens of your core values. You've been signposted to various issues in the guide, and you've made a decision based on your own values. Sometimes it turns out that might be the wrong decision, and you might find yourself in trouble. And if you are, there are also a lot of resources available to the profession. So if you're in a difficult situation and you need some assistance or guidance, you can always, if the guide itself isn't helping you, you can contact the Guidance and Ethics Committee of the Law Society. If you phone them in the Law Society number, which is 016724800, and ask for the Guidance and Ethics Committee Secretary, they would be able to either direct you to the provision in the guide or a practice note. And it's a very helpful resource to have, actually, because you can get the answer quite quickly as to where you need to look further. If you are in maybe more bother than that, there's also a panel of solicitors to assist those in regulatory difficulty, and again, that's available through the Law Society. There are solicitors helplines. There's one run by the DSBA, and obviously being from Cork, everything centres around Cork. So the Southern Law Association also have a helpline, although I'm not sure if they'll help anyone who isn't a Cork person. They might, depending if you have some relative or something, maybe they'll help. But the DSBA and the Law Society have several other types of other committees that all provide guidance and help. The most important thing, I think, when you do find yourself reaching a decision, is to document your thought process. This is something that we see an awful lot. A lot of the time, these ethical decisions or difficult decisions come up when you're under pressure, either from being bullied by a client, as Justine mentioned earlier, or you're under pressure from your opposite number, or you just have a lot of stuff on your desk and you make a snap decision. We're all decision makers and we're all problem solvers, and we're used to making decisions quickly. But sometimes you make a decision quickly when you're very busy, and you might not remember the prevailing circumstances 5 or 6 years down the road. But the client might, and when you get taken to task on something several years down the road, if you have a written note of how you approached the problem and why you made a particular decision, it will be invaluable in defending your position at that point, because you're just not going to remember all the specific details. So if you document your thought process and document why you've made a decision in a particular way, it will be very useful in helping you down the road. So I think that's pretty much it.
Thanks, Robert. I might just add there, just in relation to the panel of solicitors to assist those in regulatory difficulty. This is a panel of solicitors that across, I think, nearly every county across the country, and they act in a voluntary capacity, that if you receive a letter of complaint from the LSRA, that this panel will, are happy to take a phone call to, I suppose, give you guidance in how to put together that first initial response, rather than ignoring the letter or ignoring the correspondence. That there a list of solicitors, you don't have to ring the solicitor in your particular county. You can ring from any county across the country, but they will give you guidance in putting together that first initial reply. If you need further representation, then that's a separate matter in a solicitor-client relationship. But it's just, there is a panel there. And I suppose looking back, I wish I had rang somebody on it, back in 2009, because I think how I replied to this complaint against me was I put everything at it. I put in a spreadsheet and every single correspondence and every single thing with the first reply. And the LSRA will always say to you now that they're not looking for everything at the initial stages. So I suppose it's just for some initial guidance on how to approach a complaint. But if anybody does have any questions now, because I know that we're running towards the end of time, what I would suggest is that, and I think I saw a couple of questions there in the chat, that we're certainly happy to forward them on to the committee that we're on, which is Guidance and Ethics, because every month there's actually a roster of, I think, is there 3 or 4 solicitors on it every month that reply to all the queries, and all queries are replied to. So we're more than happy to receive any queries that you have seeking guidance for any of your ethical dilemmas. So thank you very much for having us, Justin, and I'll pass it back.
So Justine, just a quick question on where would they send those queries or questions that they might have?
Do you know something? If well, the phone number's there, but what I might suggest is just send them on to you, if that's okay.
Yes, no problem. Yeah. I can forward them on. Yeah,
exactly. Forward them on to the secretary of our committee.
Yeah, very good.
And generally speaking, Justin, what would happen is the committee secretary very often will be able to deal with the question themselves. So they will either be able to direct you to the appropriate part of the guide or a practice note, and can probably, very often be able to just email you the relevant practice note. But then if it's something that maybe they need to give more detail on, then pass it to one of the members of the committee who's on there.
And maybe just to reiterate, there's never a right or wrong answer necessarily. It's something you have to go through and analyze the situation and figure it out a little bit for yourself as well, whilst seeking colleague support.
This is it, that no two particular ethical dilemmas are identical. That should all depends on the facts of the situation. But I suppose just from experience, because I'm on Guidance and Ethics now since 2013, what I would have found over the years that the most kind of common questions would nearly come up in relation to transfer of files from one firm to another, or when a solicitor retires or that kind of stuff. But there's a very good and very detailed practice note on specifically the transfer of files, and that's available on the Guidance and Ethics webpage. And as Robert mentioned, there's a specific section under resources and chapters that you'll find transfer of files, because that does come up quite often. So that's I think it.
Okay, guys, thanks a lot. We're out of time. So thanks, Justine, for joining us, and Robert from the Guidance and Ethics Committee. Hopefully you'll join us on March 22nd, when we're going to do a follow-up with regards to how to deal with an LSRA complaint. So that's not a million miles away from what we've been discussing today. If anyone has a query, you can give us a call or send us an email, j.purcell@lawsociety.ie. Listen, guys, thanks very much for joining us today. Slán, agus gur mágad.
Thanks, bye.